morning, good noontime, good afternoon, good noon 30, good midday, good day, good later day, good evening, good night, good midnight, whatever time of day it is. I want you to know, hey, I'm Lynn Ferguson, and I approve this message. I'm Lynn Ferguson, also known as Lynn Tennyson, your host here on the show, Lynn Spins. It's a podcast dedicated to Black life in America and all over the world and music. So today, I want to talk about Them. So, Them is a series that I guess I should describe the first season to you, and then the second one is so that we can get to the discourse about the public discourse about the second season and about the show in general. People labeling the show as like, anti-black and basically like, black trauma fantasy porn or something like that. And it's like, I know why people would say something like that. There are a lot of shows like that out here, but this is not one of them. There will be spoilers in this. So, like, I mean, I'm obviously talking about a TV show. So, like, I mean, there's only so much you can talk about without spoiling the show. So, if you're watching this and you don't want spoilers, don't watch it. I'm not going to feel bad for you. In the words of Major Payne, I'll have no sympathy for you. So, um, the first season of Them kind of really gets into the story of a black family, four-member family, two daughters, one father and mother, and they move into a white neighborhood in the 1940s, 50s, uh, around the time of the white flight to the suburbs. And if you don't know, that was a time when white people were moving to the suburbs to get away from black people and poor people and non-white people, basically, and only be surrounded by, picture perfect white picket fence families, and obviously with the intention being to get away from black people, they felt a bit usurped when a black family moved into the neighborhood. So this is where all the problems ensue. And they do ensue. There are like three different like types of antagonists in this film or in this series, in the season, the first season. Um, but first, let me just tell you the premise. Of course, they're a black family moving into this white neighborhood, and it's basically about that. So that's what the show's about. Their experience thereafter. But it also gets into like in the beginning, there are flashbacks to um, this the mother's past. There was a uh, point in time when the mother was living on acres and acres of land out in the country, and she had a little boy with her, and you could tell that was her son, and she was feeding him in. This white woman was on the front porch, being nosy, so she came out to say hello, and you could tell by the way that the black woman was looking that she was very cautious. She knew what time period she was in. She knew what type of potential dangers this could present. So, interacting with this white woman on this porch, on her porch. So she was just very cautious, but you could tell she had that look in her eyes and on her face of like, you know, and like things could go south basically. And they did, unfortunately. I won't tell you everything that happened, but I will say that what happened there is explains why the family dynamic when they move into this white neighborhood, obviously after that, does not include a boy whatsoever. The only male is the father. So, and there's a daughter who is high school age, like 14 or so, and there is a younger daughter who is like 6 or 7 years old or so. So, got to get situated. So, there are three different types of antagonists. So there are the white people in the show, who are the main antagonists. And that's one of the main things that I have as an argument against this, black trauma porn, point that people are trying to make about the show, because it's not that. It's not that at all. I love how white people, regular, degular white people, are one of the main, and if not the main, antagonist in this show when it comes to this, because this is a horror, psychological horror thriller series. So it's amazing that they have really kind of solidified a genre of horror for Black people that really should have been explored and already was. As a Black person, I do get terrified when I see certain scenes, and it rips me up in a worse way than seeing some random, white or Black person being, tortured in a non-racially focused horror movie or something. And even when I see the Black people, I still do feel a certain kind of way, because it always harkens back to how different it is to witness slavery movies, or other movies about Black history and the trauma that we've gone through, that depict a lot of it. That does leave me clutching the pearls, cringing, turning in my body, like soul turning in my body. Like it does a lot of that for me, because one, I believe in intergenerational trauma, and I think that's what that is, post-traumatic slave disorder, if you will. But it's also just like a reality. And knowing that I go through what I go through today in 2024 with white people, it's not far removed. So that's why I think it moves me so much. So it's kind of crazy that we've already been seeing horror stories when we watch these slave movies a lot of the time, but that's another conversation. But I love that. I love that white people just being white people, just being racist, just being, anti-Black, just being, white supremacists, or as I like to now call them, white inferiorists, or what have you, inferiorists. But that's what I love about that, because they really get into that. And that has been our horror. Like, people make these, horror movies about people getting cut up into many different pieces and having their skin peeled off their body, and, being burned alive, and all these other things. How many ways can we torture you and kill you? But it's like all of this is stuff that's happened to our people on a regular basis, so much so, and in such a short amount of time comparatively, to the amount that it's just our trauma. That's why a lot of Black people don't watch horror movies. I'm a rarity. I'm not super rare. There are a lot of Black people who watch horror movies, especially nowadays. Now that we've got more people who are even more removed from slavery than me. But it makes sense. We go through certain tortures and traumas every day. Just going to the hospital is absolute hell and torture, and could result in your death or maiming or what have you, unnecessarily. And, all kinds of things just because you're Black. But there are two other main antagonists. One, obviously, the first one being white people, second one being themselves, Black people themselves, because of what the racism and anti-Blackness has done to them. So, like, they form like these certain kind of imaginary people, basically, that these beings that are basically haunting them, because and kind of driving home the reality of their racist lie, their racism felt lives, where they are, experiencing racism everywhere they go, everywhere they turn. There's not one place to go, you know? And the neighbors are doing horrible things as soon as they move in, like trying to drown them out with music, sitting out with their lawn chairs and fold up chairs in front of this woman's house, this family's house, when the husband's at work. He's an engineer. That's why he's able to move into the neighborhood. And like trying to blast them out with music, make them insane. And if you don't know, that's actually a war tactic to drown people out with annoying music. So they're playing like Jitterbug or whatever the hell the white music was back then, and nonstop on loop. for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. And they poison their dog. Dog ends up dead. Just a whole bunch of stuff. Then, of course, the second antagonist, like I said, it's themselves basically, and this kind of ego that builds within them that kind of like hammers in the um, the effects of the racism that they're experiencing with like these weird monologues of like coonish stuff and coonery and buffoonery and all kinds of stuff. And then there are ghosts. And I know this sounds like a lot, but it is, and it is, but it all makes sense. So like the ghosts they introduce, and you find out at the end of the movie these are who these people are. Because like you're throughout the series, you're like, or throughout the season, you're trying to figure out, okay, so what are all these different things? And by the end of the series, you find out what the ghosts have to do with this, and they apparently owned the town. The main guy, it's basically the ghosts of the town back in the 1700s, who were cursed by this black couple, by this woman, who was one of the couple of her and her, I think it was her husband at the time, who were the only black people in the town when they were passing through. They were invited to stay longer than they intended. And even though they, had gut feelings that they shouldn't, they decided to trust this white man who called himself trying to be nice, but how nice can you really try to be when you are infected with racism? And he was one of those people who thought that he was not racist, but only because he had fooled himself into believing that tokenizing black people is not racist. So as soon as a black person did something or was alleged to have done something that was in step with like the common view of black people, criminals, evil people, this, that, and the third, then he would completely change, and that's what happened. They were accused of doing something that they did not do overnight, and when they um, when they go to the scene where they're being surrounded by this mob of white people from the town inside of this big building that they have them in, you see that their eyes are gouged out. Both of the couple's eyes are gouged out, and they've been roughed up, and you can tell that it's like the last go of it before they're about to be killed. And the woman kind of puts the fear of God in all of them for a minute by cursing them, no eyes and everything. And she curses all of them, and basically it was like you all will pay for eternity for what you did to me or what you're doing to us and whatever. And then they go in and they continue what they're doing after she curses them. And it worked. The curse definitely cursed. And soon after, the town fell into disrepair. And, when everybody died, they would, one by one, become, few by few, um, ghosts of this town, forced to haunt it. Unfortunately, that did mean that they were able to haunt black people, and them being so racist, those are the people who they wanted to haunt. So, I love that point as well because it, like I said, it's a lot, but it's not at the same time because it all makes sense. Even the outlandish stuff that's really supernatural and this, that, and the third, it still makes sense because it's all rooted in our history as black people who descend from enslaved people in America. So, like, I really love that because that is very true. And sometimes I do feel like that. Like sometimes I feel like Native American ancestry and spirits are cursing white people, and that uh, white ghosts of Christmas past are torturing black people in America. Like I do feel that way sometimes. Because sometimes supernatural things kind of happen that seemingly supernatural at least, that it almost seems like the area kind of wants this thing to happen, or something in the area wants this to happen, wants some kind of devastation. So I love that. And then, like I said, there's the ways that they, the egos that they develop that end up haunting them and all kinds of stuff and trying to make them do horrible things to themselves and be coons and all kinds of stuff. to their detriment. And it's just really, really scary, really cool. Um, it was nice to see uh, them really get into the whole issue of being in mainly white spaces and, how that can really affect you when you are not white because they're often very racist spaces. And you got to deal with that shit if you want to get what you're trying to get out of that situation. So for me, it's my education here at this predominantly white institution. And these schools in St. Louis, these universities, supposed to be prestigious. Okay. All right. But it's a mess. Like the university I go to is just fucking ridiculous. They don't fucking care about any of the racism, any of the bullshit I go through. I've had to have nooses taken off of trees. I've had to have um my apartment changed and my living quarters changed from a dorm to an apartment because of multiple attempts to break in by a Latina who was jealous of me because I'm trans and black and beautiful. Like, it's just a lot. So I've had African immigrants from Nigeria come over here and think that they have more right and claim to an education in my hometown than I do. Putting things on my permanent record that I have to get expunged because they were not justifiable, or justified. Like, just crazy shit I've had to deal with within the first semester. So, it is what it is. But it does take a toll on you. And I know personally, like, I have had, you know, bouts of depression, anxiety, hypervigilance. I'm always hypervigilant. I'm always anxious. You know, um, anger because of what I've had to deal with and what I continue to have to deal with on a regular basis. Like just walking down the street, walking to class. Like, you get these ugly ass looks and shit. It's literally like they show these pictures of like, people who were Ruby Bridges and, Elizabeth Eckel, I believe is her name, who was, who were these pioneers for integrating schools, at least some of the first people to do it, some of the first students to, be integrated into these schools. And, you think about what they went through and compare it to your own situation, and it's just like, okay, so what's the difference? Because I'm the only trans person I know of at this school, the only trans woman, you know. I'm definitely the only trans black woman I know of at this school. I'm not saying I'm the only one. I'm just the only one I know of. Clearly, there aren't a lot, if there are any. And it's just crazy because it's just like at the end of the day, it's not conducive for you to make it. I mean, like it's not a conducive environment for your success. Like, when everyone hates you, your own people hate you because you're trans. White people and everybody else attack you because they know that your people hate you because you're trans. It's a lot. So, I really appreciated the show, especially since I was going through a an eviction situation back then. I didn't end up getting evicted, but I did have to leave um, because of the word of a white woman who lived above me, who moved in after I moved in. And despite the fact that I always paid my rent, I never had any issues with any other neighbors. This white woman was able to get me kicked out of my place in the High Point neighborhood in St. Louis, basically Clayton. So go figure. If you're from the area, you know. So it's just a lot. But so the second season deals with this same woman who played the mother, but she is not that same woman, obviously, because it takes place in the 1990s. And she is a cop, she's a detective, one of the few black ones on the force. And it just goes into a lot of the racism she deals with her fellow officers, the blue wall of silence, the ways that the police interact with the community. There's a serial killer on the loose. She ends up being assigned the case because she wanted the police to announce that there was a serial killer to the community. They didn't want to do it because they were coincidentally the serial killer. I won't say because, but coincidentally the serial killer was not killing white people. So you could say that that might have been motivation or lack thereof, seeing as there were no white people. Um, and so she went to the news under uh, incognito basically, and she alerted them to what was going on. And when the story broke, the police obviously her chief put her on the case and took had no one else on the case with her because she had made this mess. He wanted her to clean it up. So she does this and she ends up investigating the case. By the end of the season, it's only 8 episodes. First season was 10 episodes. By the end of the season, she is basically pinned for the murders that are taking place. And these murders are gruesome. Like these kids and these people are like their bones are they're found all contorted to the point where every bone in their body has been just snapped out of place. It's really fucked up. And there's this guy throughout the season who you're supposed to believe is the guy. He's this black guy who is very awkward and ends up actually going out and going to go kill someone just because he wanted to be a serial killer, basically, I guess. And it was really cool because it went into a lot of like how he was very awkward. He wasn't a stereotypical black guy. He had like what people would consider a white accent. He liked, white media. He spoke like, a very proper person who spoke proper English and didn't speak like a lot of black people were expected to speak. He was trying to be an actor and he couldn't get certain roles because he was not black enough. And, they wanted him to be a thug and this, that, and the third. And it's just really unfortunate. But it worked to paint the story the way that I believe it was supposed to be painted um, or understood. And I believe that it was supposed to be understood that if you do not deal with your trauma as a black person, and that doesn't just mean your personal trauma, that means your trauma as a people. If you don't know your history, you are doomed to repeat it. And definitely, at the very least, you're doomed to go through some bullshit. And boy, is that not only a valid point, but it's also, I think, very much so what this season was about. The second season of them. So came out a year after the first season. The first season came out in 2021. Second season came out in 2022. And there's not a third season I know of yet. So I hope it comes back, but whatever. And I really didn't think it would come back with the second season, honestly, because it was just such a great show. And it really got into these issues of race in a way that I didn't expect a show to do. And I know a lot of white people would not appreciate. So I was very surprised they came back with the second season. And that it stayed so true to the premise of the first season, and that whole premise of just like, race matters, basically. Like each season is kind of proving that race is a very big thing. It definitely matters. It needs to be dealt with. And so come to find out that, so like I said, this guy, he's black, he acts white, and he ends up committing a murder because he was infatuated with the way that it would make him look and people like him because he's just, a weird guy who no one really likes. He doesn't have any friends. His foster family disowned him. This white foster family he went to go live with when he was a kid, or he was picked up by and adopted by, but they sent him back. And he had already been sent back by the mother of his twin sister. So you come to find out that the detective is his twin sister and that they are both descendants of that first family in the first season. So they are the children of the oldest daughter from the first season. And the oldest daughter, she was going through a lot of it. And at one point, like I said, that inner ego thing, being part of the antagonist, one of the antagonists and the types of antagonists in the show in that first season. one of those, that antagonist for her made her think to dip her hand inside of a white bucket of paint and paint herself completely white. It was after she had gone through a very traumatic experience at school where white people made fun of her and tortured her because she's Black. So she ended up doing that and coming out and looking at everyone like, look at me. I'm one of you, right? You like me now, right? And it was just, and they all look at her like she's crazy and they're all just like back away. And I really loved that scene because there were a few scenes like that with different characters from the family. I really loved that scene because it really just showed how psychotic racism can make you, dealing with that can make you. Not just the people who are obviously psychotic enough to be racist, but which it's not even really a psychotic. And I hate when people try to call it a psychosis because it's not a psychosis. Even if you were taught it, it's intentional. You've eventually gotten to the point where you're intentional about it. You know, it's not a compulsive thing. It's not, some illness in your head. You know what I'm saying? I mean, if it was, then we could just basically say all white people are ill. And I think we can say that, but not for that reason and with that evidence in that capacity. And yeah, but I really love that scene because it really helped to paint the picture of just, and it also kind of gave you a chance to think about the reactions of people who put people through racist shit like that. Like they know that they're trying to do things, that they're doing things that could result in you killing yourself. They're not that naive. Like they would not feel bad if that girl would have killed herself back in the 40s or 50s. Another one less Black person they have to go to school with. That's cool. They're not worried about that. Bullies nowadays, they're not worried about people killing themselves. They want you to kill yourself. A lot of bullies tell people to kill themselves. They're not worried about all these other things. They act like they don't know the gravity. People act like these kids and these other adults who do this stuff too don't know the gravity and the weight of what they're doing, but they really do. They do. They know it. Not every one of them, but they know it. Okay, we need to stop giving people cop outs for things because it's absolutely ridiculous and it lessens the blow. It lessens the responsibility that they should have to pay for what they have done, and it lessens their culpability, which is what lessens the responsibility. So we need to stop that. There's a reason that insanity is a defense in court. But and there's a reason that there's such a high standard, burden of proof to prove, a standard to prove that, So I mean, stop willingly passing that out to white people, like, oh, you get a psychosis and you get a psychosis, girl, please. But what do you call it? I really did love it because it showed not only how deeply it affected her, that she would do something so obviously insane, but still made total sense. And it showed how callous these people are and how much that really affects people. Like I said, like I think those are the two main points: is how callous they are and how much it affects the people they do these things to, because they backed away like they didn't even know that they didn't know that she would do something like this. And they probably didn't know that she would do it in that moment, but they knew that it was possible. They knew that, what they were doing was so horrible, you know? So, I mean, it's just, I just loved it. It was so much to say about that. I, I can't really, I'm not really describing it the way I really want to, but the second season, you find out that they come from that girl. that she is their mother. Both of these people, the person you're supposed to believe is a serial killer, who only killed one person really, and the person, although he might have killed his dad too, the foster dad with the heart attack or whatever. Um, so there was that first foster family that took both of these kids in, and that is the foster family that still had that, allowed the girl to grow up with them. She wanted to be a detective, a police officer, just like her father, foster father. And this is a black family, so she really did not know that she was adopted. And the mother tells her halfway through the series, or through the season, and you come to find out that there was they were given away by this little girl, by the oldest daughter when she was, after she had them, she gave them away to this other black woman, this older black woman, so that they could um, be taken care of by her. And because she felt that what she went through with her family was just so traumatic that she couldn't bear to raise the kids. So she left them with these two little Raggedy Andy dolls that have a very racist history. If you don't know, Raggedy Andy dolls were basically like minstrel dolls, and um, black people were constantly compared to Raggedy Andys and Raggedy Ann dolls and things like that. But anyway, as a minstrel, it was a nod to minstrelsy and all kinds of stuff. But you see it as kind of like the symbol that kind of planted the seed of this disconnect between of this kind of racial fuckery that goes on in mainly the boy's head as he grows up to become that guy who murdered whoever and all this other stuff. And I mean, he's like, using the yarn and like making wigs out of it so that he can be this like creepy looking dude. And apparently, every person who's being murdered in the show is being murdered by someone who has like weird red hair, and it's just like really scary and this, that, and the third. And come to find out that it's this guy, but it's like, okay, so how is it him? Because he died in 1989 and these murders were taking place in 1919, 1991. So he died after he cut his own throat, after the police cornered him after he had killed that dude and put him in left his body in the desert. And and he didn't even try to bury the dude, like it was just some really half-ass shit or whatever. And so yeah, he ends up, apparently, I guess he came back and he was doing this from the grave, basically. So he was doing this as a ghost, which is in step with the series. It does have things like that. It has nods to things like that. They didn't really introduce that concept until the very last point in the series, but they did in the first season. But they did the same thing in the second season. So yeah, that makes sense. But the only difference is that a lot of the things that were happening were, all of those things in the second season were done by this ghost, whereas in the first season they weren't all done by the ghost. So, or the ghosts in the first season. So, yeah. But basically, if you want to kind of simplify it, it was his infatuation with this doll, which gave him an infatuation with whiteness. And that, really kind of spurred this murderous mentality in him, along with the post traumatic slave disorder, the intergenerational trauma that followed him from his family's experience, before he was born. So, from his grandmother's, and aunt and mother's experience when they were that, little black family in the suburbs. So, it was just very interesting. And then it also showed how she was affected by all of this, being pinned for the murders and all this other stuff, and having been very, done some other things or whatever, and been associated with some other things. It made it apparent that it was also her history that was coming back to haunt them as well, and the same history. So it was just like I felt like that was very, very amazing to find out at the end of the show, of the season, because it's like, oh, okay, so you tied it back into know about your history, know where you come from, so that you don't end up unable to deal with things that may come from that. You know, this stuff is not just in your past. And I love that. I love that there is a show out here that's sending that kind of a message. And I just find a lot of the takes on this to be very uh, unintelligent, unfortunately. You know, people are reading into this and immediately just dubbing it to be trauma porn, black trauma porn. And it's like, that's not what this is. Like, this is telling a story. This is really deep. And, you know, you got people like Julesy, who I love so much. I love her channel. But she has like a whole book club and everything. Like she reads all the time apparently. But like it's just like, I mean, every time she speaks, her vocabulary is so freaking. You can't go more than 3 words without some word you might not have known, or you definitely didn't know. So it just really kind of surprised me that she was with such an analytical mind, that she was bamboozled by this show like this, because it's just like, I feel like it's pretty straightforward. Like I feel like it definitely takes an artistic and an intelligent mind to unravel all of those meanings, but like I don't think it takes a mind like, I don't know, James Baldwin or something. You know what I'm saying? Like I don't think you have to be Baldwin or um, Langston or Du Bois to be able to really understand that. You know, Picasso, Michelangelo, to really understand what this show is putting forth. So I think you just really have to be invested. I think you have to give it more than just one episode of a watch or something and then think that you know what it's about. You know, we do have trauma in our history as Black people, and every story that is made isn't always gonna, no, it doesn't have to support speak to that, but like every story that's made also doesn't have to avoid that. Like, there are many things we can do with that history, and we should do with that history. And I love the fact that this is a genre. Like, I love that this is really solidifying this as a genre. I hate what that could bring, because white people always want to tell Black stories. They just can't tell their own. I mean, and then when they tell theirs, when they tell ours, we're supposed to be happy with them. But when they tell theirs, we're supposed to be okay with the fact that people are mad that they ever put a Black person in them. Well, then don't tell our stories. But it is what it is. And I think that's very disingenuous too. I will throw that in here. I think it's very disingenuous. A lot of these white people who are upset with Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon and Star Wars and all these other things, for putting Black people and other people in them. I think it's very disingenuous to be like that when you all have never made arguments. I guarantee you the majority of them have never, if any of them, have never made arguments about why white people should not be telling Black stories on screen. They don't care about that. But having us out here looking at a fool based on white views, no problem. But telling a story completely accurately, when it comes to the material and the plot and the characters and this, that, and the third, and the only thing that you deviate from is the actual race of the person playing the character, problems. And it's a fantasy, a sci-fi thing that's not even rooted in reality. So I just wanted to bring that to you guys because I wanted some kind of positivity about this show to be out there in the zeitgeist of information about this, because it's just like every single video I passed, talking about this was just like the same old shit. It was the same old take of like, this is Black trauma porn, and I'm just like, you all get one word, one term, a new thing, and then y'all run it in the ground. Like, everything is not this thing just because you just learned that term. Like, girl, stop. Like, watch something all the way through, give it a chance, and if you don't like it, you don't like it. Okay, whoop-de-doo. But like, to say it's Black trauma porn, like, I just feel like that does it such a disservice, and I think it's just really upsetting, because it's just like, I think more Black people need to be watching shows like this. I think that this is very important. because it teaches us about our history, and it gives us new concepts and new amazing, interesting stories that are very much so rooted in reality, you know, that can help us to have a better perspective of our struggle and our plight and our lives. So, I'm Lynn Ferguson, also known as Lynn Tennyson, your host here on the show, and I welcome you next time we jump in Lynn's